Welcome to this new automotive news video for Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. Today we're going to talk about Volkswagen ending one of its combustion engines and, at the same time, announcing the end of the downsizing era. This means dropping small three-cylinder engines and bringing back four-cylinders. We'll discuss this further. We'll also talk about Volkswagen for another piece of news, since the brand is also confirming that it's returning to the large SUV segment. We'll also cover some Stellantis news. First, because we have more information about Citroën's upcoming mini city car. And already, it seems like there's some bad news. And then we'll talk about Opel, whose future electric cars sold in Europe will be Chinese cars. And finally, we'll talk about a new automotive safety issue that's exploding right now, which is very similar to the Takata airbag case, since this also involves a manufacturer of defective airbags that explode on their own. I hope you'll be interested in the topics covered in this video. If that's the case, I'd appreciate it if you showed it by leaving a like and subscribing for future videos. By boosting this one, if that option's available to you, and of course also by leaving a comment where you share your opinion on today's news, especially regarding the famous engine we're going to talk about today at Volkswagen. Feel free to share your experiences about this. If you had a vehicle equipped with it, were you satisfied? Did you have any reliability issues? The engine we're talking about today, which Volkswagen is currently discontinuing, is the 1-liter TSI, the small three-cylinder gasoline engine whose end is now confirmed at Volkswagen. This engine is about 15 years old. The first models equipped with it came out in the 2010s, and it was still in use under the hoods of many Volkswagen vehicles. You can find it under the hood of the Apollo and SUVs like the T-Roc, T-Cross, and Taygo. It's also in other Volkswagen Group brands such as Seat, Skoda, and Audi, where it's called TFSI. On paper, this engine had everything going for it when it came out, since in theory, this small turbo engine was supposed to deliver pretty good performance while consuming very little. But in reality, it quickly showed its limitations. It suffered from more or less serious reliability problems, but above all, the fuel consumption skyrocketed as soon as this engine was installed in SUVs. In less aerodynamic, heavier vehicles, where fitting this small three-cylinder engine made no sense at all, and that's actually the reason why it's disappearing. In a few months, a new European protocol for calculating fuel consumption will come into effect. It's the famous Euro 7 standard, and this Euro 7 standard now takes into account much more realistic usage scenarios. You should know that it costs brands a lot of money to certify engines for standards like this one. Probably several billion euros. So, what's the point of spending billions of euros to get certified? An engine that will be much harder to sell going forward, since now the real fuel consumption will be displayed, as well as the real CO2 emissions. So, it's the end of the 1-liter three-cylinder TSI, but Volkswagen is already preparing its replacement. It won't be a three-cylinder, it will actually be the 1.5-liter four-cylinder TSI. And that's what Volkswagen will be betting on in the future and what they will invest in to meet the famous Euro 7 standard. Engines with larger displacement are typically more reliable at the same power levels. While they may use more fuel on paper, their actual and official fuel consumption differ less. Volkswagen also took advantage of this announcement to confirm that the future engines it will use, I'm really talking about the Volkswagen brand here, not the group, when it comes to gasoline engines will no longer exceed 2 liters of displacement and will all use hybrid systems. This marks the end of an era, and I believe other manufacturers will follow. Many brands have done this recently. I discussed it in a dedicated video. When it comes to three-cylinder engines, whether it's Renault, Peugeot, or really any established car maker, they've all turned to turbocharged three-cylinder engines because it's more economical on paper. But everyone realized, and that's also true for customers, that in reality, it consumes more, it's not reliable, and it's not very pleasant to drive. So we're probably going to see, as we were already talking about in a video about 2 years ago, the end of downsizing and the return of four-cylinder engines, which are more efficient, more reliable, and probably also more rational. By the way, since we're talking about Volkswagen, Volkswagen has confirmed that it is planning a new generation of the Touareg SUV. Even though it's much less publicized than before, the Touareg still exists, it's still being sold, and it's still based on the same platform as the Cayenne, which is the MLB Evo platform. The current generation is 8 years old and ending. While Volkswagen focuses on rationalization and cost reduction, it still believes there is demand for a new Touareg. And for those who want to buy large SUVs, either premium or luxury, but who don't want a flashy brand like Porsche, for example, that's why the Touareg is returning, though its details remain unknown. It's likely there will be electric versions based on the PPC platform of the new electric Cayenne, which could even use its 108 kilowatt batteries and offer similar performance and range. For a lower price, probably under 100,000 euros, it's still an amount that's probably way too high for a modern electric Volkswagen, but it will still be cheaper than a Porsche. Besides that, we don't know if hybrid or combustion versions could come out. But anyway, as you probably gathered from the first part of this video, if that ever happens, there's still a good chance that it would be a little cheaper, sure, but above all, it would be capped at a 2-liter gasoline engine. The Touareg V6 and V10 TDI are things of the past. You have to move on from them, unfortunately. At Citroën, they're starting to talk a little about the brand's future tiny city car. Let me remind you that the concept is to offer a European take on K cars, meaning to offer small, really small cars. We're talking about a vehicle that's about 3.5 meters long. The goal of this category of cars is to offer simpler cars with fewer safety standards to comply with, so they could be sold at a lower price. Well, the cheapest option at Citroën still comes at a price, since we're talking about a car with a target price before incentives of 15,000 euros for a tiny car, not very versatile, and most likely limited to 90 km/h. Up until now, Citroën was wondering what kind of powertrain to offer in this car, and now they've made a decision. This new tiny city car will only be available as a 100% electric vehicle. They had thought about releasing a hybrid engine version, which likely would have been better for both cost and versatility. But that's not happening, which means that Citroën will launch it around 2028 with a small, very small electric car with a very limited range, probably less than 200 kilometers, sold for around 15,000 euros. So in 2 years, in 2028, we're keeping our fingers crossed that it will happen. But there's still a good chance that we'll be able to start buying cars for around 15,000 to 20,000 euros, fully electric, which will probably exceed 400 to 500 kilometers of range. That's something a very small car won't be able to do, with such a small platform and so little space to fit bigger batteries. And by the way, regarding electric cars from the Stellantis group, you should know that the agreements between Stellantis and the Chinese brand Lipmotor, which Stellantis distributes in Europe, have made good progress. An agreement has reportedly been reached between Lipmotor and Stellantis to jointly develop Stellantis Group's future electric models, which means, to put it simply, that Stellantis will benefit from Lipmotor's electric technologies, which is far ahead of Peugeot or Citroën, for example, to sell, for instance, electric Opels that won't have much Opel left in them, since in the end, they'll feature Chinese engineering and mechanics. So here, there are two pieces of news in one, because we're already talking about a joint SUV project. It's a vehicle whose platform, electric motors, and battery would come from Lipmotor, while the design would be entirely done by Opel. But we're also talking about a purely commercial partnership for future generations of the Mocha, in which Stellantis would buy platforms, electric powertrains, or batteries from Lipmotor to then independently develop the rest of the vehicle. For now, I'm talking about Opel, but Alpha fans might find this disappointing, that there is also a partnership project for something very similar at Alfa Romeo. There is talk of all these vehicles being manufactured in Zaragoza, Spain, at the same factory where Lipmotor vehicles are already produced, precisely in order to make the most of the production lines. To finish, we're going to talk about a case that's emerging and is very reminiscent of the Takata case. It's another case of a malfunctioning airbag that explodes on its own, but this time, it's not from Takata, it's from the Chinese manufacturer DTN. These are Chinese airbags that have reportedly already been involved in about 10 deaths, and roughly the same issues as with the Takata airbags have been observed. That is to say, it's a technical problem involving the airbag inflators, which either don't deploy properly. So in that case, during an accident, having no airbag is a problem. Or, like Takata airbags, they might explode unexpectedly. This project saw the metal and plastic fragments, all the glass shards, everything inside the vehicle directly into the passengers and the driver, which can cause fatalities. This mainly concerns vehicles produced between 2017 and 2022, but there's something that will probably make this issue much more complicated to handle than the Takata airbags. DTN airbags are actually quite rarely installed in new cars in Europe. However, they are sometimes used as replacement airbags, meaning that if for some reason you had to have your airbag replaced, even if you originally had an airbag from another brand, it's possible you could end up with a DTN airbag. This creates a traceability issue in identifying all vehicles still using DTN airbags. Currently, there's no large-scale recall or mandatory replacement. Still, if that ever happens, how are we going to find cars that had DTN airbags installed as replacements when the information wasn't carefully stored in the computer systems of the garages that handled it? That could turn into a really big issue. Fortunately, the scope of this issue is smaller than the Takata airbags problem. Takata was really tens of millions of airbags. Here we're talking about a much more reasonable quantity, and the period of problematic production is much shorter. 4 years, whereas with Takata, it went on for years and years and years. We'll see where all this leads us. In the meantime, I hope you found this little video interesting. If that's the case, show it by leaving a like and subscribing for future videos. You can also become a supporter by clicking the join button under this video. I'll see you very soon for a new video. Bye.